atomic gigantification was a sweeping Japan nation when along came a dude with an ultra attitude, a Kamen Rider who's the greatest kicker of Japan. And of all, man, life's too short now, baby, to not talk big now, baby.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to Kaiju Conversation. I'm your host, Elijah, and joining me is nobody, actually. So, quick heads up, this is a post-recorded introduction. I am proud to reveal to everybody the interviews I conducted for my work on the Yuzo, The Biggest Battle in Tokyo Blu-ray for SRS Cinema. I did the audio commentary for the film. Now, there's one caveat to doing audio commentary. No matter how much information you have, once the film is over, you have no more time to talk. So, what I had to do was cut a lot of stuff that I found and got information. Some of it, I didn't get to use the exact audio from the people I interviewed. Some of it I did. So, if you want to hear everything in context of the audio commentary, I highly recommend you go to srscinema.com and order the Yuzo, The Biggest Battle in Tokyo Blu-ray. It's Region A only, but you can play it on any Blu-ray player as far as I'm aware.
If you have a region-free player.
But I'm very happy to announce that we, Kaiju Conversation, have not one, not two, not three, but 4 exclusive interviews that you have here before you. You have one with Willy Evans, the director of the Kansas City Underground Film Festival, on the convention and bringing Yuzo to the United States. Suit modeler Daisuke Sato, who worked on Howl from Beyond the Fog, Hoshi 35, Godzilla Final Wars, and Godzilla, Mothra, and King Ghidorah, Giant Monsters All Out Attack. For what I believe is his podcast debut, you have Masanori Machida, actor for Gappa, the Triphibian Monster, The Green Slime, and a slew of Kaiju and Tokusatsu films. This is actually his second Kaiju production. Gappa was his first. And finally, director Yoshikazu Ishii, who worked on Attack of the Giant Teacher, Godzilla Final Wars, Ultraman Saga, and many other Tokusatsu properties. So I was very honored to be able to have all of them on board for my Yuzo commentary, and they were all nice enough to give me the authorization to republish the interviews in full here on Kaiju Conversation. So there is a ton of information here that got cut from that commentary, like I said, but there's tons of information that didn't make it into this that is in that commentary. So I highly recommend checking it out. If you don't have a Blu-ray player, September 9th, 2024, the wide release DVD comes out. So go order that on any major retailer website. I definitely recommend it. So without further ado, here are 4 interviews for Yuzo, The Biggest Battle in Tokyo. So my first question is, can you give us an introduction to who you are and the Kansas City Underground Film Festival?
Yeah, my name is Willy Evans. I'm the director and co-founder of the Kansas City Underground Film Festival. We are a completely free nonprofit film festival operating here in Kansas City, Missouri, and we are heading into our 5th year of just a annual multi-day festival featuring feature films, short films from all around the world, with a big emphasis on low-budget, independent, and really just kind of creative and unique movies. We have a big emphasis on making sure that our festival is accessible. We try to get as many people in who've maybe never been to a festival before. We do that by being centrally located. We have no admission for any of our screenings, so people are welcome to come to any of our screenings completely for free. And we've found that we're able to create some really great environments and bring filmmakers in and get them to interact with an audience. And for, I think, filmmakers who are working independently or working with lower budgets, it's, I can't speak for all of them, but I know a good number of them are just as excited to just have an audience to interact with. And so we're not by any means the biggest festival around, but we are really, really love movies, and we have an audience of people who really, really love movies. So.
Now, out of curiosity, how did you get involved with the film festival process and event stuff?
Yeah, so the festival was founded in 2019 because here in Kansas City there was a local independent movie theater called the Tivoli that closed down, and so when it closed, my friends and we kind of started to panic a little bit. We were like, "Oh, what's going to happen to film as an art form? We have to preserve it. We have to do something about this." And so we said, "You know what? We're going to just start our own festival." And it was an idea that we liked the idea of for a long time. We like watching random movies and picking out the things that, picking out the diamond in the rough and making recommendations and stuff like that. That's something we've always loved about movies. And so this gives us a chance to do it on a kind of a larger platform.
Now, for the 2022 Kansas City Underground Film Festival, you had Yuzo, The Biggest Battle in Tokyo, shown off. Mm-hmm. Now, how did you get that movie to be shown at the festival?
So we have an open submission process where we have filmmakers from all around the world send us hundreds and hundreds of movies. And it was one of the film's producers, I think, reached out to us with some interest in entering the film. And we were like, yeah, absolutely. We'd love to see it. Submitted it to us pretty soon after that, watched it, immediately knew that this was something special. This is exactly the kind of thing that we look for. This is why we spend hundreds and hundreds of hours reviewing just random movies that people send us, and it really was a perfect, really great accident in a lot of ways. Like we just happened to have this wonderful, delightful little movie just fall in our lap like this. I think
at the film festival, and this is, I was there. I believe you wore a Mothra against Godzilla shirt.
Yeah.
Now, what's your history with kaiju and tokusatsu cinema?
It's actually fairly limited. I'm someone who comes from the kind of the artsy fartsy, high-minded art house theater, kind of movies. I have a huge love of Japanese films, really international cinema in general. I really love. I love kaiju movies, but they've never really been the big niche that I had. So when we saw Yuzo, we had to make sure, like, okay, we got to make sure that we have people on our team who know what they're talking about when it comes to kaiju movies. This is the real deal, right? We've got Virus King is as impressive as we think he is, and so we had other members of our team review it, and so it was great to have that, like, kind of affirmation that, like, okay, so I may not be the biggest kaiju guy, but I know a good movie when I see it, and Yuzo's a good movie. So.
Speaking of that, specifically, after the film was shown, what was the reception from the audience members?
Oh, it was wonderful. And this is something that we had entirely anticipated, just a combination of how, Yuzo is a real crowd-pleasing movie. You're going to watch it and you're going to have a good time, and it's really fun. And then the audience that we bring into K-Cuff is really excited about movies, and they're really excited to interact with filmmakers. And so from the moment that we knew that director Ishii was going to be there, we knew that we were going to have a great turnout. We were going to have a great response. And when we actually did screen the movie, we had director Ishii was there, and he gave a Q&A afterwards, and he was signing posters and talking to people about the movie until I think well after midnight. And then him and I got in my car and we went to Burger King and we got some Whoppers afterwards. But it was a really, really great reaction to it, and it was a great community feel to the whole night. It was really great.
Now, how did you manage to get Ishii-san to travel all the way from Japan to be there for the world premiere?
You have to ask him. I think one thing that you'll probably learn interacting with director Ishii is he can be a little eccentric, a little out there at times. I don't know if you get that impression watching Yuzo. He makes some very strong choices, and this is something that I think he really, really wanted to see the movie at a festival that cared, that had an audience that cared and wanted to interact with him about the movie. So, he was the one who first asked if he could, and so we were able to pull some strings. We were able to get kind of a supplementary budget together to, we subsidize filmmaker travel, because that's one of the things that we really care about. We want to make sure that, in a film festival, you want to make sure that you are able to have interactions between audiences and the artists. And it's one of the things that makes it, different and special from watching a movie at home, watching a movie in a theater, is you get that extra level of connection, extra context added to it. I just think he was really excited about the idea of it, and so it was not a hard sell to get him out here for sure.
Now, what was your favorite memory of interacting with him in the time he was present?
Oh man, Director Ishii and I really had a great time. Him and I, because we're a small independent festival, and so we don't have the budget to send out teams of drivers or volunteers to go pick up people and chauffeur them around town. So him and I spent a good amount of time. When he was in town, it was me and him hanging out together. And so I have some great memories. He really loves collecting physical media. And so he was really excited about going around to different places and buying movies while he was here in town. And so took him to a couple places to go do that. I tried to convince him. I think he was choosing between a copy of Slumber Party Massacre and Hard Ticket to Hawaii. He was choosing between these two movies, and I was like, hey, you gotta get Hard Ticket to Hawaii. It's one of my favorite movies. And he ended up not going with it. It's just stuff like that was really great. I found out, I think I mentioned it earlier, he really likes Burger King. He was very excited to go to Burger King after the screening, and it wasn't his first choice, but it was like 1 a.m. There was not a lot of options, and when it was Burger King was an option, it was like, oh, okay, well that's fine, that's perfect, we'll go with that. I think he said it was like his favorite meal he had, and I had all these things planned. I was like, oh, we're gonna go to the best restaurant, like Kansas City, we're known for barbecue, we're gonna try to get you to the best barbecue places and stuff like that. I really think the Burger King Whopper he had was the best meal he had the entire time.
Oh, I love that. So, following the premiere, there was also a showing at the Stray Cat Center.
Mm-hmm.
Were you involved with that?
Yeah. So we often will partner with the Stray Cat Film Center. It's a nonprofit micro cinema here in town. It's a single screen theater that is entirely volunteer run. It is a space where people program movies because they care about movies and they want to show them to Kansas City as a community. And so we partner with them to show movies throughout the year, and especially award-winning movies, things that we really want to highlight. Maybe we had people come to the original screening at the festival and say, oh man, I wish I could have brought somebody with me, or oh, I know somebody who really loved this movie. And so we wanted to create second chances for people to bring people, even more of an audience to see the movie. And so we did screen it a second time at Stray Cat Film Center, I think a couple months later, and had a fantastic turnout. We had several people come to watch the movie for a second time because they had loved it so much the first time. And I don't blame them. I think I've seen Yuzo like 5 times now, and every time I just find something new that's like delightful and just makes me laugh. So yeah.
So in the 5 years that you've run the film Underground Film Festival, have you had many movies get the opportunity to get released to Blu-ray or like a wide DVD release?
We've had a couple that I don't think that they had a wide DVD release. We've had several that were are available on streaming services now, and we've had several that were released on smaller physical media labels. But a larger physical media release is something that's new for us. And I think being a relatively young, relatively small festival, it's pretty decent hit rate for us so far, and so I'm really excited. I could see this being something that we really tout and to try to brag about, like, hey, we were the premiere of Yuzo. It's kind of a feather in our cap for us right now. We're really excited.
I got just one last question. So for people who are getting into film and maybe they attend film festivals or whatnot, what is one thing you would tell somebody about film festivals, about cinema, and about just movies in general? What's like one thing you...
Oh man, so I think of actually something John Waters said that I can't remember the direct quote, but it essentially boils down to just watch movies, watch good movies, watch bad movies, watch weird movies, watch normal movies, and you'll find the ones that you like, and you'll gravitate towards the ones that you like. And even when you watch a bad movie, you learn about what makes it bad and what makes the good ones good. And so that's always my go-to piece of advice, is watch as many movies as you can all the time. Yeah, and just don't be picky about it. I think that's one of the things that at the Kansas City Underground Film Festival, we really want to emphasize is that we can be the intersection between, high-minded, art film that's, trying to push the boundaries in kind of very intentional, kind of intellectual ways. But then we can also be a very, a great place for films that are trying to push in terms of entertainment, in terms of narrative, in terms of construction, and these different ways to make movies and to make them uniquely and independently and make them as kind of passion projects, very much like Yuzo. I feel like that's a long-winded answer to your question, but it boils down to watch movies. That's my advice.
I love that.
Daisuke Sato-san, what was your role in production for Yuzo, The Biggest Battle in Tokyo?
はい。そうですね、僕が、石井監督から、オファーを受けて、怪獣の、バイラスキングを作ることになりました。最初はもともと石井監督とは、2004年のゴジラファイナルウォーズっていう映画の現場で一緒でして、ちょっとその縁があって、ちょっと前に再会して、いろいろ話をしてるうちに、じゃあちょっと映画手伝ってほしいみたいな話が出て、それから、バイラスキングを作ることになりました。で、もともと僕が造形、ゴジラとかガメラとかの着ぐるみとかの仕事もやってたので、バイラスキングの、デザインではなくて、着ぐるみを作る方の、担当として、参加させてもらってます。はい。
Okay, so Director Sato was essentially given the offer from Director Ishii to do the modeling work for Virus King, because they worked together on the set of Godzilla Final Wars back in 2004, and right before the production of Yuzo, they did meet up together again, and they visited some temples and whatnot. And from there, he was basically given the offer to do Virus King, just because he had previously worked on the suits for Godzilla and Gamera. And specifically for this movie, he was asked to work on the suit design rather than doing the actual design work for the kaiju itself. And from that was where things happened the way they did.
Okay. Were you ever on set as they filmed the special effects scenes?
今回に関しては、撮影には立ち会っていなくて、着ぐるみができた段階で、石井監督にお渡しして、終わっている状況でした。
So for this film, Director Sato was not on set for the filming of the movie. He was basically done with his job after handing over the suit for Virus King to Director Ishii.
What is your history with Yoshikazu Ishii?
さっきも言ったように、石井監督とは、2004年のゴジラファイナルウォーズという、北村隆平監督の、監督作品で、特撮監督が、浅田さんだったんですけど、浅田監督だったんですけども、そこの、助監督として石井さんが入っていて、で、僕は、ゴジラとかの、いろんな怪獣と着ぐるみの、造形部と言われる、部署で、現場に入っていました。で、やっぱり演出部の仕事って、結構その怪獣の着ぐるみに近い仕事でして、で、僕らも、基本的にその怪獣に、スーツアクターが入るときとかにも、やっぱりフォローで、したりする役なので、スタジオの、セットの上に上がって、怪獣の着ぐるみの横について、アクターとかと接しながらやる仕事なので、で、演出部も同じように、ちょっと着ぐるみの補助をやったり、やっぱり、カメラの前でカチンコとかやったりっていうのがあるんで、そういうので、よく、現場で話す機会がよくあったという、ところで、いろいろとつながりができてきたというのがあります。
So essentially, this goes back again to the set of Godzilla Final Wars. So Director Ishii was an assistant director for the special effects department. As you know, the actual director was Mr. Duhei. And at the same time, Mr. Sato was part of the essentially the sculpting department. So they would be on set and hand dealing a lot with not only the camera people, but also with the suit actors. They'd be alongside them to discuss how these suits are moving. And through that, they had a lot of chances to discuss with each other and have a lot of talks. And from that, they basically became acquaintances and colleagues from just having that experience on the set of Final Wars.
Tomoaki Matsumoto did the design for Virus King. Did you have any help in getting him attached to this project?
わかりました。松本 本くんとの出会いのところから言うと、もともと松本くんは僕が日本の、大分県という場所の出身でして、で、そこで、怪獣ファンの、コミュニティがあって、で、そこで僕はたまたま話を聞きに行った時に松本くんもいて、で、彼はまだ、その時は大学生だったんですけど、で、そこでつながりができて、で、彼が、東京に出てくるというタイミングで、いろいろと、話もしていた時に、ちょうど石井監督が、デザインできる人間を探しているということを言ってたので、松本くんを紹介したという経緯があります。はい。で、デザインに関しては、なんでしょう、日本の、特撮といいますか、造形の仕事の話で言うと、基本的にもうデザイン画に対して造形する人間で口を出さないですよ。要するに僕らの仕事っていうのは、はい、完成したデザイン画を、立体にする仕事なので、デザインの段階でこういうことはできませんっていうのは基本的に言わないです。なので、もう基本的には松本くんが、仕上げてきたデザイン画に対し、を、忠実に立体化することを心がけたということになります。
了解です。So essentially what happened was that Mr. Sato and Mr. Matsumoto were actually, they're basically from the same hometown and they were both part of the Kaiju fan community. So at the time they were already kind of they already knew each other to an extent. And when Mr. Sato received his offer from Mr. Ishii, Mr. Matsumoto was there and he was very much interested at the time. So eventually when it became known that Director Ishii was looking for somebody to design the kaiju, thanks to various circumstances, because Mr. Matsumoto at the time was a college student. Based on the time when he is able to come to Tokyo and whatnot, it was decided that, where Mr. Sato decided to recommend him to Mr. Ishii as the designer, and it was from that Virus King got the designer that it did. In regards to the design, in Japanese tokusatsu, there is generally this policy where there is not necessarily much communication between the sculpting department and the design department. So essentially, there's never going to be a case where the modeling team is going to say, this is not possible, or this design can't be done during the design phase. For the modeling team, it's always going to be where they receive a fully completed design and they try their best to replicate the design in 3D as faithfully as possible.
So what was the process for making the Virus King suit?
バイラスキング、ちょっとですね、普通の映画と比べて予算が少なかったので、ちょっとそのコストをいろいろ材料とか削減しながら作っていったっていうのは第一にあります。で、ちょっと自分が心がけたのは、せめて口、ウルトラマンに出てくる怪獣くらいにはしたかったので、せめて口は、口を開くメカニックは入れるということを前提に作っていきました。で、体の作り方に関しては基本的にゴジラとかガメラとかでやってるのとほとんど同じやり方でやってます。だけど頭に関しては普通映画用の怪獣だと粘土原型、クレイで原型を作ってそれをかたどって作っていくんですけども、ちょっとその予算がなかったんで、ちょっと特殊ななんだろう、柔らかいんだけどちゃんと形も保つっていう素材を削り出して、で、そこに、ラテックスという怪獣の表面、皮膚の表現で使う、ゴムの素材を貼って、作っていきました。いや、もう完全にもうバイラスキングが、要するに普通の映画用の怪獣って、原型を作った後に、コアって言われる FRP のコアが中に入ってるんですけど、大体そこにメカを仕込むんですけど、ちょっとそれができなかったんで、もう直接その削り出した素材に対して、アルミのフレームを組んでいって、口の開閉ができるようにしたっていうのがあります。
So essentially what happened with the creation of Virus King was that Virus King, as you know, since this is this film didn't have a huge amount of budget, it was created in a method that was not exactly identical to the way that most kaiju film suits were made. On the part of Mr. Sato, what he was mostly focused on was trying to make sure that at the very least the jaw parts were correct. So it was able to the gimmick that was involved was usable. Now, for Virus King, because of the decreased budget, the material costs were very restrictive. So unlike most kaiju film suits where they were basically sculpted in clay, from there they would take a mold of it and then use that for casting to make the suit. In this case, they use a fairly soft material that can maintain its own shape so that they can sculpt on top of it. And from there, it was basically a good way to say it's like one shot to get it all done instead of having it be based on a mold. Also, for the jaw mechanism, unlike with something like, say, Godzilla, there wasn't FRP. So FRP is fiber reinforced plastic. That's a common material that's used in these suits. In this case, they didn't use that for the innards of the jaw mechanism. Instead, it was essentially just the soft material that's encasing a aluminum frame, and on top of that, there is going to be the mechanism that allows the jaws to open.
How long did it take to create the suit?
だいたい40日ぐらいですかね。日本の、例えばゴジラとかの怪獣映画で言うと、結構作るのに2、3ヶ月かける場合があるんですけど、逆に言うとウルトラマンとかの怪獣って、ものによっては2週間とか3週間で作るので、まあ、それのなんか中間と言いますか。あとやっぱりスタッフ、基本的に僕がほぼ一人で作って、で、もう一人一緒にやってくれている、松本智弘さんっていう方が塗装とか、仕上げとか、メカとかをやってくれたっていう、ほぼ二人で作ったものなので、ちょっと時間がかかったというのがあります。
So essentially what happened was that this took about 4 weeks to create. The suit for Virus King was essentially, the time taken was somewhere in between the suit construction time of the Ultraman Kaiju suit, which usually takes about 2 to 3 weeks, versus something like a Godzilla suit, which can take up to 2 to 3 months. For the creation process, Mr. Sato was basically doing it alone for the most part, but he did have it was Mr. Tomohiro who was helping with the painting and the colorations.
So what materials was the Virus King suit made out of?
基本的な体を構成しているのは、一般的にもう本当にゴジラとかウルトラマンでも使っている、ウレタンフォームで形を作って削り出して、そこにラテックスっていうレテックスのゴムの、まあ、型に、石膏の型に、ラテックスの樹脂、生のラテックスを塗って乾かして、シートにしたものを貼っていって、体を作ってます。で、頭に関しては、エサフォームって呼ばれる建築用の素材をコアにして、削り出してコアにして、そこにラテックスの皮膚を貼って構成してます。
エサフォームですか？
エサフォームです。
はい。So the body of Virus King is made just like most kaiju would be made. So like say Godzilla and whatnot, it would be made from urethane, essentially just hard plastered on there and then sculpted. And then on top of that, they would pour latex rubber and have that dried out so that would create the general skin texture of a kaiju. For the head, they used a locally made material called ESA foam. And that's a type of material that allows it to have a little bit more of the properties that they would need for the moving mechanisms and whatnot.
So how did your experience on Godzilla and other kaiju productions help you with creating Virus King?
まあ、バイラスキング、基本的にまあ、予算の都合もあって、そんなに大きくは作れないというところもありつつ、なおかつその首のところはメカとかそんなに仕込めないので、なるべく簡素化しないといけないっていう時に、まあ、ゴジラファイナルウォーズの着ぐるみのゴジラの頭の構造が結構シンプルな構造になっていたので、ちょっとそれを参考にさせてもらって、似たような構造の、スーツにしています。で、まあ背中とか、まあ大きい背びれとか、ついてますけど、それはまあちょっとウルトラマンとかでよく使って、まあさっき言ったエサフォームっていうのはウルトラマンとかでもよく使ってるものだったんですけど、まあそれを削り出して作っていってますね。
So based on, so essentially the influences from past projects come from sampling some of the creation techniques that were utilized in Virus King suits. So for example, the body itself, because it's restricted by budget, it couldn't be a very huge suit, and the neck and whatnot couldn't have many mechanical mechanisms. So essentially, a lot of the design work, especially for the head part and for the neck component, were coming from the Final Wars Godzilla suit, which was also, relatively speaking, kind of simple. Similarly, for the spines on the back, a lot of the design for that came from the techniques used on Ultraman suits, which is to use the foam material used for the head on the spines and just directly sculpting on top of that to make sure that it remains lightweight.
And did you assist in making the Virus King doll that was blown up at the end?
それは僕が一人で、やりました。
The final detonation maquette was made by Mr. Sato alone.
What was the process like on making the doll?
あれは基本的に発泡スチロールで全部できているんですけども、ちょっと爆発した時に白い発泡スチロールだと、もう発泡スチロールがバレてしまうんで、黒い発泡スチロールを使っています。で、黒い発泡スチロールを、なんでしょう、ブロックから、バイラスキングの形を削り出していって、だいたい着ぐるみのサイズ感と比較して、何分の1だろう。3分の1か2分の1ぐらいの大きさで、そこそこ大きいモデルを作ってます。で、制作期間は、はい、そんなもうかけてないんで10日ぐらいですかね、あれは。
どれぐらい
10日、10 days.
So essentially, the maquette itself was made from, like most explosion-used maquettes, it's made from styrofoam. It's basically carved out of one block of styrofoam. And to make sure that it doesn't look super fake, like how exploding styrofoams can often look, black styrofoam was used instead of white. For the creation process, generally speaking, the size of the maquette itself is only about a half or a third scale of what the actual suit is. And it was created in about 10 days.
Wow, okay. Is there anything you would like to say to Western fans of Virus King?
結構限られた予算とか時間の中で頑張って作った着ぐるみで、結構デザイン画通りにある意味造形できたと思っているので、映画の方で楽しんでいただければと思います。
Although the suit itself was constrained by various budget and cost issues, Mr. Sato is very confident that he was able to reproduce the design in an accurate and faithful manner. So he is very much hoping that the fans would be entertained by its presence on screen.
So for Machida-san, tell us how you got involved with Yuzo, the Biggest Battle in Tokyo.
球場に出たきっかけ。監督。言っていただければ。監督に電話かかってきて。僕ですね。僕がお願いします。石井さんから。それで出たんです。
So it was because director Ishii called Mr. Machida that he was eventually be able to be part of the film.
Machida-san, speaking of kaiju movies, how did you get involved with Gappa the Triphibian Monster?
怪獣映画といえば、町田さんはかつて、大教授ガッパという映画にも出演したことがありますよね。それに関してどの経緯で関わるようになりましたのかと聞きたいです。はい。
どの経緯で関わったか教えてくれますか。
ガッパはオーディションです。オーディション5回ぐらい行ったかな。何百人も来て。それで1時、2時、3時、4時。で、最終審査が5時。
わかりました。
それで受かったんです。
So, for Gappa, Mr. Machida became involved in the film through an audition. He was auditioned about 5 times. It went for quite a while, and hundreds of people showed up for the audition, but eventually he was able to be chosen, and that was how he became part of the film.
And then one more question for Machida-san before we ask Ishii-san a question. How long did production on Gappa last, and what was your favorite memory from it?
Machida-san 制作日数どんぐらいかかったんだろう。だいぶかかったと思うんで、僕の出番だけで1ヶ月です。子供で学校行ってたんで、夏休みかなの1ヶ月間で撮ってくれたんです。出番は。で、撮影本体はだいぶかかったと思います。 思い出深いの。全部なんだけど、全部だけど、でも特にっていうと、やっぱ最後、湖で富士山の下の富士五湖のとこで、水に入ってったのがちょっとすごい思い出ありますね。すごい大変だったんで。はい。
ごめんなさい。最後ね、ちょっと勘違いしてて、最後の、映画の中で最後は羽田空港なんで、最後じゃなくて、富士五湖ですね。富士五湖の湖のシーンが良かったと。
まあ、最後一番泣けたのは羽田空港ですけどね。羽田空港でガッパが行くと、あそこはやっぱ泣けましたよ。大変だったのが、富士五湖で、こう、ガッパが上がってくるとき、みんなが行って、僕が水の中入ってくるのが大変だったんです。で、すごい印象に残ってるのは他には、羽田空港でガッパが飛んでいくとき最後、ラストシーンで、っていうのはやっぱ印象に残ってますね。で、今は多分あそこでは撮影できないと思います。昔だから、本当の羽田空港で撮りましたから、夜中に。すごいことだと思います。
So for Mr. Machida's part in Gappa, so Gappa itself was shot over a fairly long time, about 2 to 3 months at minimum. But for Mr. Machida's part in particular, it took about a month. So at the time, since he was a student at school, that ate up about a month of his summer vacation. In regards to some of his more treasured memories, of course, he believes that all of the experiences that he had on set were very valuable and were very important to him. But for him, the two parts that he felt were most memorable, one was the shots at Fuji, where all the kids had to get into the water. That was quite the event. But also one of the other scene that he felt was very memorable was when the kids were waving goodbye to Gappa as he flew away from Haneda Airport. They shot that scene at night, and it's a very impressive scene for a time, and he believes that it's because it was shot back in the day that they were able to use Haneda as the shooting location, because nowadays they probably wouldn't be able to get away with it.
What was your reaction upon reading the script?
面白いなって最初思いました。面白いなって。で結局コロナね、ちょうどコロナ禍なのにそれうまくつなげてんなと思いました。コロナがこうなって怪獣になってってみんなのここでぶつかってで最後やっつけちゃうっていう話でちょっと面白いなと思って興味がありました。読んだ時。はい。
So from the start, Mr. Machida thought the script was very interesting. It was something that also just happened to really much tie into the pandemic spirit, where it's the idea that the virus became a kaiju and that the people would come together and throw their all against it and eventually take care of it. So from the very start, he was very much interested in the project. It was something that he thought was very interesting and very timely. So that was something that was fun for everyone.
Now, Machida-san, what was it like returning to kaiju movies after so long?
すごい楽しかった。楽しかった。それで怪獣に入りたいと思って。スーツは着た。やらしてくれずダメって言われた。
So returning to these kaiju movies for Mr. Machida was a lot of fun. He really kind of wanted to get back into the suits as well, since in the past he probably was a suit actor. But Mr. Ishii did say no to that, so I was shot down. But it was definitely something that Mr. Machida thought was a lot of fun.
Machida-san, it's said that you were in The Green Slime as a suit actor. Is this true?
そうです。子供のやつでした。
子供の
グリーンスライムの中に町田さんが入っていらっしゃる。
面とこから見て。
子供の頃、スーツアクターとしての経験に関して少し語ってくださいませんか？
楽しくて うん、すごい楽しかったです。その前にもいろんなの入ってるんですけど、ずっとその担当で入ったのはガンマ。ね。で、ほら、仮面だけの忍者ハットリくんとか、もうやってたんです。知らない。
忍者ハットリくんってわかります？藤子不二雄先生の
忍者ハットリくん。
実写版なんですけど、東映が。
わかると思います。
忍者ハットリくん。はい。もうやってます。
ありました、ありました。はい、わかりました。
ガンマンの。
そうですか。
はい。ごめんなさい。ちょっと待って。
いや、これに関しては知りませんでしたから、驚きました。
うん。で、楽しかった、ガンマンの中入って、重かった、子供だったから、ちょっとそのスーツが重くて、バッテリーここに積んでる。バッテリーがあって、目があって、倒れると起きれなかった。手が長くて。
そうですか。
よく重くて転んだこと。
わあ、すげえ話よ。So yes, Mr. Machida was indeed part of the Green Slime, or as it was called in Japan, Gamma 3, Great Operation in Space. At the time, he was a child, and previously he had been suit actors in other projects too. So, for example, he was part of Toei's Ninja Hattori-kun, an older black and white movie. But in terms of being someone who was the suit actor from the start to the finish, Green Slime was his first experience. Now, for him, it was a lot of fun, even though the suit was very heavy. The suit itself, he saw out of essentially the eye or the mouth part of the alien, and he had some control over the arms. But the suit itself was very heavy. The batteries were loaded right where the chest is. And the suit itself, because it was so heavy, it fell over a lot. And if it fell over, he was not able to self-right within the suit. They would need to come in and rescue him. So there was a lot of challenges regarding the suit acting, but it was a lot of fun.
Can you tell us how you got your role in Ultra 7 and what working on that was like?
7? ああ。よく撮影行ってて、車、ポインターだっけあれ。ポインター。あれ、こう触っててよく怒られましたよ。汚れるから触るなって。
激優さんね。かっこいい。
触りたくて子供時代。
すげえですよ。
楽しかったです。
So for Ultra 7, Mr. Machida was part of Ultra 7, but it wasn't too clear about how he got in. But essentially, when he was there, he was brought in pretty frequently for that episode. And during the time, he remembers very fondly that he had touched the pointer, which is the Ultra Guard car, without permission, and the staff got mad at him because they said that he would be getting it dirty, and he was yelled at. But it was still a fun experience for him.
Now, Machida-san, over 2 decades later, you came back to Ultraman with Ultraman Tiga and Ultraman Gaia. What was that like?
Well, ティガの時の、僕が変身した後、
はい。
こうやったのかな。その後のスーツアクターは僕です。中入ってました。それは、その時の原田監督に言って、衣装合わせの時に、僕がやりたいと、中入れさせてくれって言って、中入りました。だから、人間の時からチェンジする変身して、大変だったですよ。白塗りだから、そのまんま被ってたんで、
そうですよね。
面が白くなっちゃう。だからもう撮影行ったり来たり、特撮班と、この本編班と行ったり来たりしてました。僕待ちで、こっち終わったらこっち。
大変でしたよね。
こっち終わったらこっち。大変でした。 面白かったです。
いや、チャレンジャーも思い深い、怪人ですよね。町田さんの演じた宇宙人で、子供の頃で私も見ましたので、結構覚えてます。はい。
ありがとうございます。
はい、チャリンジャーです。
チャリンジャ
ー。後にガイアにでは、ラクダピンの、
出てた。2回ぐらい出たの。ガイアは、
はい、
宅急便の所長、主任かな。出てますね。ゲスト主役の人が働いてる場所の
ボスみたいな。
そう、ボスかな。
なるほど。はい、
やりましたね。
なんか面白いエピソードないですか？なんか怪獣宇宙人になるわけじゃないですよね。
そう。全然絡みがなかったよね。ちょっとつまんなかった。僕は普通の芝居だけだから寂しかった。
ですよね。はい、わかりました。So for the return with Tiga and Gaia, for Gaia, it was mostly just a role of where he played as we discussed earlier, he played the station master for Rakudabin or camel delivery. But for Tiga, he was able to get a more major part as the alien Charija, who went back in time from 2010 to 1965 to go find Eiji Tsuburaya in that storyline. At the time, initially what was meant to be was that after he finished playing his human role, everything else would be carried on by the suit actor. But he told director Harada at the time where he was like, I want to be in the suit. So they were like, okay, we'll have you in the suit. So he was basically stuck, not stuck, but he was faced with the responsibility of needing to navigate between both the drama department and the Tokusatsu department, which, as you may or may not know, is shot on entirely different sets on two different rotations. So that was somewhat difficult for him. But there was also the fact that because he was playing Charija, the alien, he was wearing white makeup all the time, and it was very strange and kind of tough to live with. But it was something that he thought was a lot of fun. And he expressed a little bit of disappointment that the roles between the shows. So when he was the postmaster in Gaia versus when he was the alien in Tiga, there weren't any connections between the two. The two roles are entirely separate, which he thought was a little disappointing.
How did production on an Ultraman show change from the 1960s to the 1990s?
なるだけ基本は同じだったと思います。撮影の基本は。だけどやっぱり時代が経ってるんで、このなんていうのかな、幕のあれが早かったのかな。で、アフレコ、セブンの時は全部アフレコ、オールアフレコだ。で、チャリジャンとかちょこっとだけ抜いただけで、あとは同時収録して。
現場で声を、昔はやっぱ音声の機材が悪かったのか、やっぱ現場で撮らないテレビとかが多かったんですけど、ウルトラセブンなんかは町田さんが出てた頃は現場で音取らずにそのフィルムが上がってから後から声を合わせてた。ただティガはもうその同時に現場で僕たちはシンクロと言うんですけど、シンクロして撮ってったっていうことですかね。
そうですね。
人数的には同じくらいでした？
人数もね、ずいぶんいたな。
どっちがいたんですか、セブンと？
もう、ティガの方がいたんじゃない？
ティガの方が多かったそうです、スタッフは。
で、パートがね、こうしっかりしてた。
パートがしっかりしてたそうです。だか
ら、俺、両方行ってるから。
だってセブン知ってる人はなかなかいないです
から。そう。
これ3ですから。
僕はセブンで面白かったですよ。
確かに。平成ウルトラマンに出演したときに、スタッフに送られなかったよね。そういう経験がなかったよね。
何？ちょっとごめんなさい。セ
ブンの時に、ポインターが触って、スタッフが結構怒られたよね。平成の時にはもう、そういうハプニングがなかったよね。
ない。そうです。
そんなかった。傘乗ってた。傘。
雨傘。アンブレラ。
はい、CG で、アルコールの、瓶の中にも、顔が出ていたようなシーンがありましたよね。
うん。合成ね。
合成に関してどれぐらい参加しましたかのか、それとも、その関して、それに関して。
合成も参加したんですか？
した。合成随分した。
じゃあ、グリ
ーンバックで。
セットですか？
セット。
セットでグリーンバックで撮ってました。
あれは面白かったよね。
出てくるね。そう、面白かった。うん。どういうふうに出来上がりが楽しみだったやってる時に。どういうふうになるのかなってわからないから。
わかりました。So between the two sets, although there's been a good amount, like 20 years, the general shooting practices remain fairly consistent. But one of the big changes was that the audio recording department was very much different. So for Ultra 7, as with shows at the time, due to perhaps technological limitations, but all the audio was after recording. So there was no synchro in terms of audio. Everything was done in the post-production process. But with Tiga, because of advances in technology, only a small portion of Charija's voices, for example, were actually done in post-recording. Comparatively, there also Machida-san also felt like there were more people on set for Tiga as compared to 7. And for the parts where Charija morphs his face out of a wall and morphs his face into a beer glass, those parts were also done with Machida-san instead of having it be like some sort of digital creation. It was shot via green screen. So he was there for that part as well. Though he's not exactly privy on how the digital morphing process was done, he was there to provide the samples that were eventually used.
Now, Machida-san, can you tell us a little bit about your roles in Kamen Rider Gotchard and Sky Rider?
スカイライダーは爆弾人間。うん。で、こう、街を破壊していく。悪をやりました。それで、ガッチャードは、プロレスジムの会長で、変身しました。変身して、ライダーに、必殺技を教える。うん。それで勝ちました。どうやってやったから変身。
わかりました。スカイライダーについて、実はこのインタビューの直前に、そのエピソード、その、話をレビューしましたけど、爆弾人間は当時、ライダーと戦ったり、バイクを乗ったり、スタントをやりましたよね。それに関して、それをやったのは町田さんでしょうか、それとも、スーツアクターさんでしたか。
爆弾人間がバイク乗ったりとか、スーツアクター。
それはスーツアクター。
はい。
僕じゃない。
わかりました。
うん。
Right. So for his roles in Sky Rider, as we discussed earlier on, he was a bomb human. He was basically controlled by the bad guys to go destroy, I believe it was Yokohama in that episode. And during that scene, the bomb humans did actually fight Rider and ride bikes and try to like fight him in those ways. But for those action scenes, Mr. Machida was not involved. It was all of the stunt actors. He was just there to show his face for the scenes. And for Kamen Rider Gotchard, very recently, he is the owner of a pro wrestling gym. And during that episode, he was able to transform, and he actually taught Gotchard his finishing move. So that was something that's very interesting.
Now, to elaborate on another role, Machida-san, what was your experience on Special Rescue Police Winspector?
インスペクター、何やったっけなどっかの会社の社員で、普通の人だったかな、インスペクター。普通の、あれだったかな普通の人だったと思う。いい人じゃないかな。見たら全然違ったりして。
はい、クノというキャラクターでした。
工藤
こういうキャラクターでした。何らかの記憶がありますか？忘れました。そうです。はい、わかりました。はい、大丈夫です。大丈夫です。So for Wind Spectre, Mr. Machida actually doesn't remember much about that particular performance. He seems to remember it as being like playing a salaryman where he was not necessarily a bad guy, but he was like a good guy, but he just doesn't remember much of the performance in general. So even the name kind of escapes him now. So it's definitely not a huge role.
You also appeared in the 2000 movie D. Can you tell us a little bit about that production?
D の開発者の博士をやりました。それまた今回の博士とまた違うんですけど、その時はやっぱパソコンやってその D を作って、でコンバットスーツに乗る人間と2人でこうやっていくんで、なんていうのかな。カメラがやっぱ小さいカメラでやってたんで、どこにあるか分かんないような、なんつうの、ポータブル。それまではカメラは大きかったんで、初め聞いちゃったの。カメラどこにあんのって言ったら、あそここんな小さいから。で、望遠で撮ってたりしてて。で、やっぱ合成が多かったんで、で、それは大変だったですよ。だから、結局、スーツアクターがいてこうやるの、喋るのを横で助監督さんが喋ってて、セリフを。で、僕が聞いててこう会話するっていう。そういうのをやってたんで、少しタイミングがずれてたんですよ。スーツアクターとそのセリフ言ってる人と僕のあれが。で、多分ね、スーツアクターも僕が言ってるの聞こえてないと思うんですよ。そういうところがちょっと大変だった。面白かったです。
For his portrayals in D, like in Yuzo, he is a professor. Except in the case of D, he is someone who basically designed D, the mecha, and as a role, it's similar in that they're both like just tapping away on keyboards and doing all sorts of tech stuff. But it is very different in terms of at least superficially. What's also interesting about the production of D was that D was the first time where Mr. Machida actually saw very small cameras. So until then, the film cameras that were being used for shooting have generally been pretty large. So when D was produced using small cameras and telescoping lenses, that was something that he thought was very interesting. It was something that felt really new, and it was something that he couldn't necessarily even see when he was on screen. One of the other things that was very interesting about D was that because it was very heavy with composites, there were cases where there were lags going on during production. So, for example, when there was during scenes where he had to talk to the suit actor, so somebody in a suit. He was speaking on set, but the lines for the suited character was read by the assistant director from off camera because the guy in the suit, one, probably couldn't speak, and two, probably couldn't hear him. But during the production of those type of scenes, there's typically a lag going on. So there is a delay between what the suit actor is doing versus what the assistant director is actually saying. So it becomes very difficult to work with, but it happens.
Now, Machida-san, you've done a lot of different projects over the years. What have been some of your favorite memories?
大きいぞ。大きいぞ。
エピソードが知りたいです。
公園で、宇宙人を探すところで、鳥かごみたいなのを引っ掛けるところがシーンがあったんですけど。
公園の砂場ですね。
うん、砂場で。その時雨が降ってて、コロナで周り子供がいなかった。公園なのに、俺たち大人ばっかりで、それで撮ってました。楽しかったけど、雨降って大変だったよね。まあそれでね、監督ね、ワンシーンワッカンとか長いんで、僕大変だったです、セリフが。まあ面白かった。基本的にでもいろいろ、監督と初めてだったんで、作品撮影ね。だから、どういうふうに撮っていくのかなって、初めちょっとわからなかったんで、新鮮だったです。 面白かったです。
For Mr. Machida's long history of doing things, his most treasured memory or his most impactful memory is Yuzo. And that comes down to the scene where they were shooting in the park next to the sand pit, where they were trying to capture aliens with the birdcage. It was raining, so for one, it was a really tough shoot. For two, this is the first time Mr. Machida is working with director Ishii, so there's a degree of freshness in that. Not only is this their first time like working together, but also there's a sense that I don't know what the director wants from me, so I'm not exactly sure what to shoot. But also, it was really weird because it's in the middle of a park and there's no kids because it's in the middle of Corona, so it's incredibly strange. So it's this just mixture of different things coming together that makes it incredibly memorable.
How many days were you on set of Yuzo?
4日か。4日。
Yeah, 4 days.
Now, Machida-san, over the years, you've worked with many Japanese studios. For Yuzo, it was an independently made film. What are some of the differences between studio and independent work?
違いはない。そんな、ちょっとスタッフが少ないかなぐらい。スタッフが少ないかぐらいで。違いはほとんどないです。撮り方も一緒だし。スタッフが少ない。それだけ。だからなんかね、手作り感があって楽しかったです。手作り感があって。
So, for Mr. Machida, actually, between large studio films and Yuzo as an independent production, there actually wasn't that much in terms of differences. The differences mostly came down to basically a lack of budget. So there is a lack of personnel, and there is a lack of funding in general for a lot of like luxuries and wellness of life, essentially. But generally speaking, there's also a greater sense of handmade. There's a greater sense of that things were just like cracked by hand on the set of Yuzo in comparison to a more sterile environment like a studio film. So although there is definitely a sense of difference in terms of production value, production methods and methodology was essentially all the same.
Is it difficult as an actor to transition from one project to another, like a horror movie to a comedy movie?
役によってその台本を見てその役によって合うようにいつも考えてます。で普段怪獣映画じゃない時はちょっと悪い人が多いんでヤクザとかそっちが多いんです。で怪獣映画の場合は案外いい人の役が多いですね。なぜか。はい。で、その俺によって、で、僕はアニメもやってます。アニメの声。外部のアテレコもやってるし、映画、テレビ、それと舞台もやってるんで、その役によって毎回変えてます。本によって。それがやっぱり作ってる時が一番楽しいですね。俳優としては。
So for Mr. Machida, so typically speaking, when Mr. Machida is not acting in kaiju, he's typically playing a lot of antagonistic roles in most drama movies. For example, he's often like a yakuza or never do well essentially. But when it comes to kaiju films, he's typically the protagonist for some reason. But that tangent aside, he's also in a variety of different things. He's doing voice acting for anime. He's doing voice recording work. He's doing dub. He's also doing like stage productions. So for all of these cases, for each of them, as an actor, it is technically his job to change the way that he acts based on the script that he's given. And for him, that's actually the most fun part of being an actor, is to just be able to figure out what the character should be like from the script that he's being given. So that's generally how he thinks for this case.
Now, Machida-san, have there been any kaiju or tokusatsu projects you were going to be in that never happened or got canceled?
ない。 ないですね。で、途中でできなくなったのがガメラ。ガメラはちょっと、途中で出れなくなっちゃって。まだそんな撮ってなかったんで、他の作品と被っちゃってて、昔はうまく縫えなくて、それがガメラですね。ちょこっと出てるのかな。だからノンタイトルかな。
ガメラといえば、シリーズですから、どれですか？
シリーズのね、ボーイスカートが出てくるやつなんですよ。子供たちが。それがだから3作目かな。そんな感じです。2作目、3作目とか。
2作目のあれですよ。バルゴンがあって、ギャオスがあって。
バルゴンとギャオスね。
だからそこら辺だな。そこら辺だ。あとはちゃんと流れてる。あとは全部放送してます。
So in terms of appearing in like stuff that eventually got canceled, that's never been a thing for Mr. Machida. But he did have canceled performances in movies that were produced. The one that really comes to mind in terms of being Tokusatsu is Gamera. He was planned to be in one of the Gamera movies. It's either Gamera vs. Barugan, Gamera vs. Gauss, or maybe even Gamera vs. Virus. It's one of those films. He remembers it as being one with Boy Scouts, but since there's children in almost every Gamera movie, it's kind of difficult to remember which one exactly that is. It was just a matter of a conflict in scheduling that prevented him from showing up.
Now, moving over to Ishii Kamtoku. How long did it take you to develop the script for Yuzo, The Biggest Battle in Tokyo? And how did you find your writer, Gen Tanaka?
はい、わかりました。もともと何年か前に安い低予算の映画があって、その脚本家の一人として彼が来たんだけど、途中で辞めてしまいました。それを僕が覚えていて、今回大きいぞの話を作る上で、大きい話は全部僕が作りました。こういうふうにしたいと。で、それで1週間に一遍毎日会って、話をじゃあこうしよう、ああしようってやりながら、とりあえず2人で全部もう最後までの話を詰めて、それで書いてもらった。最初の1項目だけを彼に書いてもらって、その後僕が全部現場で撮れるように直していきました。結局8ヶ月ぐらいかかっちゃいましたね。
わかりました。So, Mr. Ishii and Mr. Tanaka initially met during the filming of a cheaper budget movie, where at the time Mr. Tanaka was had as the scriptwriter, but eventually that ended up not being made. But he remembered Mr. Tanaka from then. So after all those years, he approached Mr. Tanaka about making the script for the movie. Now, for the general story of Yuzo, it was something that Mr. Ishii had already had in mind. So it was generally where all the framework and whatnot were set in place. It was just a matter of having Mr. Tanaka kind of flesh it out. So over the course of about a week, they met together every single day to hash out the movie in terms of details. So in the end, there was really only one script. And from that one script on set, everything was changed up and adjusted to be the way it ended up being finally. But overall, the actual production of the story of Yuzo actually took around 8 months.
まあ、相当たくさんあるんですけど、やっぱりある程度低予算で撮らなきゃいけないというところで考えて本を作っていきましたが、なかなかやっぱそこでもうまくいかないところがたくさんあって、例えば部屋のシークエンスを変更したりとか、怪獣に関してはもう全て僕が書き足したりとか、あと中国服を着ている倉田というのが出てくるんですけど、最初に言われたらもう出てこない設定だったんですよ。それを最後にもう一回戻したりとか、もう一回戻ってくるようにしたりとか、そういう現場での細かいことは大体僕が書き足していったというか感じですかね。まあ本当にもうあまりにも多くて、結局最初の1個目を田中さんに、まあ当然2人で話して最初の1個目は作ったんですけど、そこからまた撮影するまでに6ヶ月ぐらいあったんで、あとコロナだったせいもあって、まあいろいろとできることとできないことっていうのが結構あって、それでロケ場所も含めて変えていったりとか、 あとだいぶ長いセリフが多かったんで、それをちょっと短めにしちゃったりとかカットしちゃったりしたところもあります。
So there were a lot of changes between what was written and what was actually being shot, and that a lot of that comes down to what was relatively possible and what was not possible. A lot of the bigger changes were, for example, some of the indoor scenes saw a lot of changes. Having Kurata, who in Chinese word return at the end of the movie, was something that was added in during the shooting process. For the kaiju scenes with Virateen and whatnot, those were basically all just set from the shooting set, just because that was something that Director Ishii was wanting to do personally. But generally, there were a lot of changes, and a lot of that also comes down to the fact that after the initial draft was made, not to say that the draft was like a failure or anything, because it was made with like direct collaboration between the writer and the director, but there was a gap of about 6 months, as well as Corona, that ate into production time. So because of that, there were impacts on what was possible and what was not possible between draft and actual finalized script. In addition, there were also a few really wordy lines that in the original script that were cut down and trimmed so that delivery was a little bit more concise. But generally speaking, there was just a tremendous number of changes. So it would not be feasible to outline all of them here.
Where were the locations in the film shot at?
大体はですね、東京のすぐ近くの埼玉です、正確に言うと。タイトルに東京ってついてる割には、コロナでですね、貸してくれないんですよ、場所を。東京都自体が公園使うなとかで。それで大体埼玉で撮ってます。すぐ隣です。東京の隣の県ですね。
So for the filming locations of Yuzo, although the name of the movie is Big Battle in Tokyo, technically, it's the locations are actually shot in the neighboring prefecture of Saitama, and that comes down to because since it's the middle of Corona season, they couldn't actually like rent out any locations within Tokyo. So because of that, it was shot mostly in Saitama.
How long did it take you to scout out these locations, and how did you find them?
ロケーションハンティングはすごいかかりました。なぜならばさっき言ったように最初に貸してくれるって言ったところがコロナのためにやめてくれというところがすごく多くてしょっちゅうひっくり返されちゃいました。だからそういう意味で言うと2、3ヶ月場所を探してました。で、昔僕がその埼玉の映画祭の審査員をやったことを思い出して、そこのですね、スポンサーの一人だった不動産会社のことを思い出して、その不動産会社に頭下げに行って、なんかどっかロケ場所を貸してくれませんかというふうなことを言って、そしたら、うちだったらいいですよって言って、空いてるところを使わせてもらって、ほとんど取りました。東京でもいくつかは取ってますけど、ほとんどがもう9割大体埼玉ですね。それでよかったですよね。質問はそういうことでよかったですよね。なんか追加でありますか？大丈夫ですね。
So hunting for the locations actually took quite a while because they were shot down by a lot of the locations within Tokyo itself. So eventually the hunt itself dragged out for about 2 to 3 months. What ended up getting everything shot in Saitama. So there were still a little bit that were shot in Tokyo itself, but about 90% of the film was actually shot in Saitama. What came to connect the film to Saitama was that previously Director Ishii had been working with films within that prefecture, and he had known essentially a real estate agent within that area that contacted him about lending out a few locations, and it was from there that he basically agreed to the locations that were being recommended, and from there that's when the film was made.
How long did it take to film the human scenes in Yuzo?
8 days、8日です。
お金が
ないから。本当は7日で撮ろうと思ったら雨が降っちゃったんで8日になりました。
8日ですよね。はい、8日です。4日で。いや、4日。はい。
8日、days。
はい。So for the drama part of Yuzo, it was shot over the course of 8 days. There were due to a lack of budget. The initial plan was to have it be done in 7, but on one of the days it rained, so it was extended, and it was extended all the way to 8 days for the human drama.
もうちょっと時間をかけて撮りたかったんですけど、やっぱお金が自分のお金で作ってるんで、もう足りなくなったら止まっちゃうからってことで、泣く頑張って撮りました。
It was meant to be longer, but because it was a self-funded movie, the money would start to run dry. So it was kind of like, there was a painful decision to make, but they made do with what they could, and they worked hard to get it done the way it could be done.
Now, Ishii Kantoku, what were some of the biggest challenges during production?
.毎日困難ばっかしで、さっき言ったように、最初に4日間ぐらいは毎日雨が降ってました。それで雨が見えないところで撮ってるんで、実は何カットかは実は雨が映ってます。で、そういうのがあったりして、もっと最後びっくりするのは、ミュージカルシーンで出てくれる女優さんと男優さんが現場に来て、本がつまらないって帰ってしまって、撮影ができませんでした。それもびっくりで、その撮影をやるために3ヶ月後に本当に半日だけ撮影をやりました。それにもすごいお金をかかってしまってすごく残念でした。毎日問題だらけで、現場に小道具がなかったりとかですね、ロケ現場に行ったら貸したくないって言われて帰らされたりとか、毎日本当に問題だらけで、もう本当に大変でした。
ご苦労様でした。いや、結構大変そうです。When it comes to production challenges, that was every day. Every day kind of sucked. So there were so like for example, for the first few days of shooting, it was extended too because of like one day of rain. But for the first few days, there was rain every day. So they had to shoot basically without knowing exactly what they were seeing due to the rain. It was very tough. Later on for the musical parts, when they had the singer and the accompaniment show up, they were like, this script is too boring. They just left. So Dad dragged that entire scene out for about like 3 months until they could finally get a replacement done. But there was also the case where because of they had to constantly scout locations during the middle of the pandemic. There were times where they would just show up at the location and they would then just say, "Hi, we don't want to rent this to you anymore. So please leave." So there were setbacks constantly. It was all in all an incredibly rough shoot, but it got done.
で、ごめんなさい、チャレンジということで言えば、自分ので原作やりながら、脚本書きながら、監督やりながら、特撮監督もやって、怪獣映画を作るんだということで、とにかく完成させて、みんなに見てもらいたかった。そのために本当精一杯頑張ったつもりです。
So another part of the challenge was just that Director Ishii was basically in charge of most of the core production parts. So he was in charge of the script writing, he was in charge of the actual directing, he was in charge of tokusatsu directing based on Ultraman and whatnot. Typically, and most films, typically we have a different director for the human roles, and we have a different director for the tokusatsu bits. So the fact that it's self-funded, that he wrote it, that he directed all parts, and he was so utterly involved, a lot of that just comes down to his drive to really make the movie and have it happen and just have people watch it. So for that, he worked incredibly hard just to try and get it done.
Now, speaking of the tokusatsu, were there any issues that occurred when the suit actor was performing with the Virus King costume on?
トラブルが結構ありまして、そのスーツがなかなかすごく低予算で作ってもらったためになかなかできないんですよ。で、スーツチェックに行ったらですね、まだ皮膚もついてなくて、これ本当大丈夫なのかなというような状況の中、本当に前日にやっと完成して、それで現場に持ってったんで、スーツアクターも現場で初めてそのスーツを着るみたいなことになって、なかなか大変でした。
As an addendum to the previous part, there were also cases where props were missing from the set, so that just let's add that in as a side. But when it comes to Virus King itself, That was also there was a lot of hardship for that because the film was very limited in its budget. They couldn't spend too much on the suit. So during the initial checkups on how the suit was being made, the skin wasn't done being applied yet. So nobody was quite sure whether or not this is all going to work out. But the suit was made, as we discussed with Mr. Sato. It was completed about a day before shooting began. So when it was taken to the set for shooting, the suit actor was basically trying that suit on for the first time during the shooting day. It was very interesting.
で、そういう意味で言うと、実はその怪獣作ったスーツを作った人もですね、忙しいということで現場に来てもらえなかったんで、ボンドを渡されて、壊れたらこのボンドでくっつけろと言って、現場でちょっと壊れたんで自分でボンドでこう尻尾のあたりをこう修正したりしてました。
マジですか？Mr. Sato was actually incredibly busy during the time he was making the suit, so he was not on set as we discussed with him before. So in the cases where the suit was damaged and needed maintenance, the crew was handed a bottle of glue and just told, like, if something broke, please glue it back together. So when the tail was damaged and whatnot, it was just like, here, use super glue. Have fun.
本当に現場に人が足りなくてですね、本当に出てくれた俳優さんに声をかけて空いてる人を全部呼んで特撮シーンを撮ってたんですけど、なかなか経験者がいないんで何をやればいいのかが結構みんな分からなかったみたいで、その辺がちょっと結構大変で、僕とカメラマン以外は怪獣やったことない人しかいないみたいな。だからスケジュールも全部自分で書いて、現場も次これだって全部説明して、怪獣が壊れたら自分で直してみたいなことをしてました。
One of the biggest troubles not the troubles, but one of the biggest challenges for the set essentially was that there was just a lack of personnel. Besides Director Ishii and the cameraman, basically nobody there was well-versed in kaiju production. So due to the shortage in staff, basically they were even telling the actors that, hey, can we just like get you guys to like come over and like help with this? And for the part of Director Ishii, the schedules and whatnot, those were all done by him. So he had to essentially not only come up with the schedules for all the actors and for all the special effects, but also to have explanations be like given out so that everybody who didn't have any experience would be able to make do with what they can on set. So it was a very challenging environment. But
what was the time frame for post-production?
編集CG とかがあったんで結構かかりましたね。ちょっと細かいことを忘れちゃったけど、多分半年はやってたと思います。もうちょっとやってたかもしれない。なんでかっていうと、最初に本編を撮って怪獣ができなかったんで、そこからもう編集やってて、で今度怪獣をそこに入れてって、さらに CG を足してったから、半年から下手すれば9ヶ月ぐらいやってたような気がしますね。
So post-production for Yuzo actually took quite a while, just because they couldn't get the kaiju scenes done early on, and also because CG was involved. So there was a lot of work that went into it. But eventually, all that coming together, it took roughly somewhere between the ballpark of about half a year to 9 months.
As a follow-up, were there any challenges during post-production?
編集でのチャレンジはいろいろありましたね。本当はアナログで人形をつけて大きい映像を全部撮ったんですけど、CG の人が実写に全部置き換えてくれちゃったんですよ、それを。だからそういうこっちはもうちょっと手がかからないように撮ったつもりなのを結構丁寧にワンカットずつ全部置き換えてくれたりとか、そういったところはすごくプラスになったかなと思ってますけど、僕というよりかはだから編集マンとか CG の人がそこら辺をやってくれたというか、作品を良くしてくれたというのがありますね。あと映画館だけなんですけど、5.1 チャンネルの音を作ってるんで、それは僕今までやったことがない、いつも2チャンネルステレオだったんだけど、怪獣映画だからやっぱ 5.1 チャンネルだろうみたいなことを言われて 5.1 チャンネルを作りました。それは音ですね。だからポスプロっていうことで言うと音も入るのかなと思いました。
So for editing, there was actually a good amount of challenges happening too. So essentially, initially, the kaiju scenes and whatnot were in Yuzo were actually shot in analog, but it was decided that to change it all over to CG shot by shot later on during the production process. So that added a lot to the workload. it was a good amount of challenge going into that, just changing stuff over from analog into CG. But also, what was also very challenging was that the audio was not something that Director Ishii was used to. So typically speaking, if I heard correctly, the audio for kaiju movies is about 1.5. For this, I think he was using high stereo, so it was somewhere around like at least 2.0 above. So that was something that was very challenging, since it was something that he did not actually have experience doing before.
What was the process of financing Yuzo?
式弁、全額自費で作りました。で、やっぱちょっとずつさっき言ったような、ミュージカルシーンの俳優が帰っちゃったりとか、怪獣が完成しなかったとか、そういったことで、ちょっとずつお金が伸びていっちゃいましたね。だから、まあ、実際は500万ぐらいかかっちゃったと思いますけどね。ただ、公開するのにもっとかかったら、それはまあいいとして。
So for this film, essentially, since it was all like self-funded, that was pretty hard. It was a fairly stressful. It was fairly stressful in terms of being a financial situation. The overall budget came out, after all the extensions and all the changes due to delays and whatnot. It came out to about 5 million yen, give or take, which is quite a bit of money. But for Tokusatsu productions, it's still in the low budget, but very impressive for low budget, especially self-funded.
How did Cinema Go become the theatrical distributor for the film?
前作のアタック・オブ・ジャイアント・ティーチャーっていう映画があって、それをそのシネマゴがまだ映画会社になる前のシネマルシェっていう映画のネットニュースで取り上げてもらったんで、それでそこの会社に話を持ってった次第です。
So the reason that Cinema Go was involved as the distribution company for Yuzo comes down to the fact that the previous film was basically also working with them. It was from before they were a full-fledged company. The Attack of the Giant Teacher was actually also done with them. So because of that, the pre-established relation basically was what prompted Yuzo to be also brought to them for distribution.
Now, how did Nikatsu become involved with Yuzo?
日活はですね、実は私がウルトラマンを監督してまして、その時のビデオの担当の方が円谷プロを辞めて日活に行ってらっしゃったんですよね。で、それでその人が僕の映画の広告を見て、よかったらうちで海外のセールスをやりませんかという形でメールが来て、で私は日活に会いに行って、で決まった次第です。だからそういう意味ではウルトラマンのおかげです。
So the reason that Nikatsu became involved was because back in the day, not back in the day, like a few years ago, Director Ishii was actually involved with Ultraman. He was involved with Ginga and Ginga S. And from there, the person that was doing video choreography at Supercut actually quit and left to go to Nikatsu. So when this person and Nikatsu saw that Director Ishii had advertisements for his film out, he reached out to Director Ishii and was like, "Hey, do you want us to help you guys with overseas with this particular movie?" And from there, Director Ishii went to go see Nikatsu, and from there, that was essentially how everything fell into place. So everything thanks to Ultraman in a sense.
How did you come up with the name for Virus King?
はい、当然皆さんも分かると思いますので、コロナだからバイラスの一番キングっていうか力強いので、ウルトラマンの怪獣レッドキングとかもありますから、キングってつけちゃおうと思ってバイラスキングという名前にしました。ウイルスですね。だからね、ウイルスの王みたいな、コロナ禍で出てくる怪獣だからそういう名前にしました。
As Director Ishii says, it might be obvious for the viewers already, but Virus King as a name is just Virus King. It's a slight corruption on how you would typically say virus in Japanese, but the general idea goes through. Since it's in the middle of Corona, it makes sense. It made sense to them to make the kaiju virus focused, but also to give it the name of King, because King, as it usually shows up in kaiju, but not represents very powerful, very like top tier type stance. So the king of the viruses, Virus King, for the pandemic.
What was the reception from the audience at the showings you attended?
やっぱり海外とかの方が受けてて、皆さん笑ってくれたんで嬉しかったです。
じゃあ、日本国内では
日本でも、なかなか笑ってるシーンで、結構皆さん笑ってくれたりして、それはすごく嬉しかった。あと、怪獣の最後のラストシーンの爆破人形にこだわって、カポックの爆破人形を作ったんですけど、怪獣大好きな人はそこを見抜いてくださって、今、つぶらやプロでウルトラマンでもやらないのに、こういう自主映画でやってるのはすごいっていうふうに褒めてもらってすごく嬉しかったです。
So, in regards to the showings that were attended, people in Japan did laugh at the scenes that were meant to be kind of funny, and there was a lot of praise thrown to the director's way for having the exploding maquette at the very end. You know, especially for people who like kaiju fans, it's a disappointment that studios like Tsuburaya doesn't do exploding maquettes anymore. But a self-produced film is able to do it. That's very impressive. But overall, the reception was a lot warmer in overseas. There was a lot of laughter for every showing. People did enjoy the comedy, and it was very heartwarming to see.
Now, Machida-san, Ishii Kantoku, how did you two meet for the first time?
どの子と知り合うこと僕は
どうなんだろう。
もともと
最初ほら一緒に他の監督ので
そうですね。僕の知り合いの監督の映画に町田さんが出てて、そこの現場にお手伝いで行った時に会って、それで次の映画出てくださいみたいなことをお願いしました。
So the two met because Mr. Machida was actually an actor for another film that was directed by a friend of Director Ishii's, and Director Ishii was actually on set for that particular film as an assistant doing a lot of helping work. During that time, that was when the two were able to meet and talk, and from there, Mr. Ishii, or Director Ishii, throughout the invitation to be in his next film, and Mr. Machida accepted. So that was kind of the origins of all of this.
And I just have one final question for both of you. Do you have any comments for the fans in the West on Yuzo?
僕も一生懸命やった作品なんで、僕の好きなところは自分のところじゃなくて、ミュージカルでやってるところが大好きなんです。応援してください。頑張って。これが成功してもっといけば、次の作品も海外に持っていきたいと監督と話してますので、よろしくお願いします。応援してください。
僕もですよね。本当に沖津を頑張って怪獣を作ったんで、ぜひ一人でも多くの人に見て、しかも楽しんで笑ってもらったりとかしていただければ嬉しいなと思ってますし、怪獣をね、なんかこう CG じゃない怪獣が少しでも楽しんでもらえれば本当良かったなと思ってますんで、一人でも多くの方に見ていただければと思って頑張って作りました。ぜひ見てください。よろしくお願いします。
The message from Mr. Machida is that this was a film that he had a lot of fun making. It was one that he worked very hard on, but his favorite scene to him was not the ones where he was in it, but rather the musical scenes, where that was something that he felt was very much, that had a lot of heart for the film. And he's very much interested in potentially taking the next film that he works on also overseas. So he's very much hoping for our continued support during that process. And for the message from Director Ishii, this is a film that he also worked really hard on. He really wants to try and preserve and spread the fun of analog kaiju films, to not rely on CG, but to have analog suitmation kaiju be enjoyed by everyone, and also have a comedy that people can laugh at and find a lot of entertainment in. So the more people that watch it, the more fun it will be for everyone, and he's very happy that it's gotten the reception that it did.
Well, hello. I'm Elijah, and I have a kaiju and tokusatsu problem. Joking aside, I am Elijah Thomas. I am part of the rotating hosts for Monsters with Attitude. You can check us out on YouTube, where we do monthly live streams talking kaiju entertainment. You can also head over to Facebook and join our Facebook group. It's a great place to talk with like-minded people. I'm also a writer. I've written for GodzillaMovies.com and in Kaiju Ramen Magazine. Currently, I write for Kaiju United. My writing has also been featured in the book Giant Bug Cinema, a Monster Kid's Guide from Bear Manor Media, where I wrote about Ghidra, the three-headed monster. I am also a filmmaker and YouTuber. You can check out my stuff on my YouTube channel, ET13 Productions, where you can see some of my short films and my older YouTube videos, along with a playlist that features all of my appearances on YouTube. I do plan on getting some new videos out soon, and my short films, so definitely check that out. This is where I don't have a script yet, but as I mentioned at the top of the show, I also contributed an audio commentary and bonus features for SRS Cinema's release of Yuzo, The Biggest Battle in Tokyo. So definitely check that out on srscinema.com, where you can order the Blu-ray. I also helped license the character Yongori for Titanic Creations. I also appeared in a kaiju movie, little-known film called Zillafoot from 2021. I made a brief cameo in the film as Skywatcher number 2. It's got a rating of 3.7 out of 10 on IMDb, so you know it's gotta be peak cinema. So if you want to watch more kaiju, you can buy the Blu-ray on srscinema.com or the DVD from any major online retailer. Or just watch it for free on Tubi with ads or on Prime. You can also check out my action figure photography on my Instagram at et13_productions and my ex, the artist formerly known as Twitter, thanks Danny, at the same handle. And as for the podcast, don't forget to rate us on iTunes. That boosts our ratings and helps us get recommended to more people just like you. If you don't have an Apple device, which I don't blame you, I don't actually. That's a lie because I'm literally using a MacBook right now. But you can rate us on Spotify. If you want to stay up to date with all things Kaiju Conversation related, follow us on Twitter at KAIJU_CONVERS. If you don't have Twitter, you can follow us on Instagram or like us on Facebook at the same handle. If you're like me before podcasting and you don't have any social media, lucky you. You can email us at kaijuconversation@gmail.com, all lowercase, all one word, you know the drill. And as always, we'll read your reviews on air for everyone to hear. We also have a Teespring store. Eventually we'll have original artwork on there, but until then you can sport our awesome logo on a t-shirt or maybe even a coffee mug. If you'd like to chat with us, check out our Discord server full of others that have similar interests to you. It's a great place, great community full of great people. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell so you can be notified anytime we upload a video. We sometimes post exclusive to the channel like bloopers or for episodes or minisodes talking about news or other subjects. We also have an interview with Mechagodzilla designer Jared Kerchevsky on the channel. I definitely butchered his name. I'm so sorry. And a huge thanks to Rex for editing all of these episodes and all the other content we upload. His links can be found below. Along with Rex, we'd like to give a huge thanks and shout out to Danny DiManna of the Godzilla Novelization Project for his amazing vocals on our theme song. You can support him by following him on Twitter at Danzilla93_GNP or visit his website, GodzillaNovelizationProject.com. And a huge thanks to Gretton Conwell from the podcast Giant Monster BS for composing the music for our theme song. You can support him by following the podcast on Twitter at Giant Monster BS or on any podcast platform under the name Giant Monster BS. And with that, we're going to wrap things up here. So thank you guys so much for listening. It is fun to be back in Kawasaki month. It's going to be a great month. We have a lot lined up, a lot of good stuff to talk about. So thank you guys, and as always, please remember, life's too short to not talk big. Bye, guys!
We are set, we are in debt, there's nothing to sweat. Life's too short now, baby. And not too big now, baby. Conversation. His name's Elijah, baby. And also Rex now, baby. We love those kaiju, baby. And you will too now.